In this video, I'll be spending another 100 days in Pixelmon on Anubis MC. Here are my goals. First, battle, catch, and evolve Pokemon to complete the main quests. Second, train a team to take down the first battle tower. And third, test my skills and defeat every tier 1 trainer of the battle frontier. Alright, so I joined Anubis and chose to play in the Paradise Realm. I had the choice between original or custom starters, so I obviously took the latter. There were so many to choose from, and they even came with bonuses. Also, if you're new to Pixelmon and want to join, check out the link below to help you get on the server. If you already have the mod, feel free to use the IP. Anyway, it was a tough decision, but I decided to go with a baby dragon. I then took a look around spawn and already loved the little room they put me in. I then went outside and was super impressed at how gorgeous this place looked. I walked around and soon found a quest master. There were all these different quests and this felt like the best place to start. I went through the tiered quests and looked at all the options. For the battler quest, I had to defeat 250 wild Pokemon. For the catcher, I had to catch different types of Pokemon. And for evolutions, I just had to evolve them. They seem simple enough, but I'm sure I'll have to grind for them. Anyway, I continued exploring, and the more I did, the more I was impressed by this resort. I felt like there was a lot more to explore, so I went back to the spawn area and eventually found the crates section. There were all these colorful crates, but the one that seemed the most important was the shiny golden one by the fountain. Apparently this was the voting crate, and if I type in /vote, I can vote for the server and get tons of rewards. By voting, I get keys which I can use on the crate to get items like this diamond shovel. I'm actually really glad that I got this shovel. I'll definitely need it for when I build my house. Speaking of houses, I feel like it's time to head out and go build one. I took one last good look at Paradise and then typed /RTP, which teleported me into a random forest. I explored the forest and found my first wild Pokemon. It was a Pachirisu, and to me, I always thought of this Pokemon as the squirrel version of Pikachu. He probably isn't as strong, but he definitely did some damage and was a pretty good opponent for Bagon. I defeated him though, and was pretty happy to win my first battle. After that, I tried my best to get out of the forest in hopes to find some nice clear land to build on. The forest was massive, and I got a little worried about nightfall, but then I remembered that there's no hostiles in the game. Strangely enough, other than that Pachirisu, I wasn't actually finding that many Pokemon, but I guess that's because I'm constantly on the move. I did find a nice flat plains biome and decided to settle down. As I chopped some trees down, I noticed that there was a gigantic blue and green Beedrill next to the forest. Now, I don't speak bee, but when he buzzed at me, I believe he was trying to tell me that only a small percentage of viewers are actually subscribed, and if they enjoy this type of content, it'd be awesome if they hit that button. Anyway, after gathering some wood, I finally got started on building my new home. I also want to mention that I got XP from chopping wood, and my woodcutting skill was already level 5. It made me wonder what types of rewards I could get from it. In addition to that, I also got levels from shoveling dirt, which was awesome. Now on to more important things. I wanted to focus on finishing this base since I'll be making this the first house for SpicyTown, a town where fans can visit and build their home next to mine by using /warp SpicyTown. Speaking of warps, I warped to the Poke Center to heal my Bagon, and I got some free Poke Snacks. They allow me to heal my Pokemon whenever I want, which is pretty handy. I also took a minute to look around the place, and it was easily the best looking Poke Center I've ever been in. Although, I guess that's not saying much since the only other ones I've been in were on the DS. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, don't forget to claim your land with the golden shovel. I'm not sure why, but whenever I see a nice unclaimed base, I always have this temptation to destroy it. Anyway, the task at hand is to fight more Pokemon to complete that quest. I also want to level up my Bagon and evolve him in the process. After defeating this flying squirrel, I took another look at the first quest and was pretty happy to see the rewards. Lots of money, lots of tokens, and even some crate keys. If I want a really decked out team, I'll have to buy some expensive TMs, so I need to be careful with my money. I also need to be careful when fighting these sheep. This cute little ball of wool just took down my baby dragon. I thought I'd test my luck again on this donkey and I got absolutely destroyed. After that were even more crushing defeats. I tried battling the snake and Bagon was doing well against him, but ended up getting taken down by his poison attacks. The next morning, however, as I looked through the Poke menu, I browsed through the options and found the daily roulette. I thought I'd give it a try and I ended up winning a life orb. I also checked out the skills menu to see the rewards for my woodcutting skill, and it was pretty much exactly what I expected. Skill keys and more wood. But after that, my day just kept getting even better. Bagon defeated a level 14 Rattata, and I found a master chest with a power lens. I also got into a fight with this Electrike, and I was finally able to catch my first Pokemon. I feel like this guy will be a great addition to the team, and I look forward to raising him. The following day when I voted again, I got a Tortuga fossil. I remembered that there was a fossil machine at the Poke Center, so I placed him in there and waited for him to dissolve. While I waited, I thought I'd take a second to explore spawn again. I found the shop area that had a ton of different shops and had a shop dedicated to Pixelmon. It pretty much had everything a player needed for their journey with tons of machines, balls, and heals. The shops were fun to explore, but I couldn't wait to see my new fossil Pokemon. In the machine, I saw this blue and black turtle and I grabbed him. I threw him out and noticed how tiny he was. I've never seen a Pokemon this small before. Regardless, I think he'll be great for the team thanks to his high defense. In other news, I clicked on this person near the fountain and I started rolling for a shiny, and the shiny I got was a Cleffa. Forget the turtle, this was by far the tiniest Pokemon I've ever seen. Moving on, after defeating this Wooloo, Bagon leveled up and learned Dragon Breath. I'm glad he learned his first dragon move, especially this one since it has a 30% chance to paralyze. This is going to make life a whole lot simpler. But to make life even easier, I can type in /kits, which will show me the paid ranked kits, the steak kit for free steak, and the tokens kit for free tokens. It might only be 10 tokens, but hey, I'll take it. Anyway, I took another look at the battle quest, and I was 20% done. Although, I was nowhere near completing the catcher quest. I just felt like it was easier to battle Pokemon rather than catch and evolve them. I did catch the Scorpy, and even though I probably won't keep him on the team, he's still a really cool Pokemon to have. Afterwards, I found this ultimate boss, who I soon found out had super high jumping abilities and could float as well. He took out my Pokemon with ease, but he failed to one-shot my level 1 Tortuga. I found out that he had the ability Sturdy, which prevents any Pokemon from one-shotting him. Moving on, I tried teleporting to other biomes, but some of them just didn't spawn enough Pokemon. I spent a lot of time in the Spruce Forest, but couldn't find anything. I RTP'd again in hopes to find some high-leveled Pokemon in this ice biome. I found this little teddy bear, and he was pretty much exactly what I wanted. High-leveled and super easy to beat. I really like this biome, so I decided to set a home here. I also chose to stay here for a while to train. Those snow cubs were great, but I wanted to see what other Pokemon were in the ice spikes. I learned that I could type in /check spawns to know which Pokemon spawn here and their spawn rate. It seemed like Swinub, Cubchoo, and Vanillite were the most common. I also checked out the snowy forest that had a bunch of Pokemon on the spawn list. I guess that makes sense since it's kind of like 2 biomes in one. After the snow biome, I warped to the desert and found this chubby little ball-shaped Pokemon who kept bouncing around. I obviously had to capture him because of how cute he looked. But as I come to think of it, all of my Pokemon are extremely cute, especially my tiny turtle, who I can't seem to find. While I was here, I found an epic boss and got absolutely demolished. I knew for sure I wouldn't win, but it doesn't hurt to try. Actually, my Pokemon are kind of dead, so I guess it does. After healing, I warped back to the desert to continue training. I fought some camels, some ground moles, these cool looking cobras, and these 4-armed rock dudes. I found this level 36 Graveler, which was the highest level I've fought so far. I got him low with Bagon, but he took him down with the rest of my Pokemon, except for Tortuga. He was level 1 and took a level 36 down with Water Gun. He got 9 levels from that, as well as the move Smackdown. I was proud to say the least, but I was focused on fighting more Pokemon here. Now I learned the great thing about staying in one biome is not only will Pokemon spawn more, but there's also higher leveled Pokemon depending on my team's highest level. With that being said, I TP'd to the forest biome and stayed here for a while. I feel like it's good to switch biomes now and then so that I can fill up the Pokédex as well. Although, fighting bosses may not be the best use of my time. I did find a village though, and where there's a village, there's trainers. However, some of these people can be quite weird, like my guy Steve here that wanted to build a robot of himself to help him make some friends. Aside from Steve, I couldn't really find any other NPCs here. All except for one who sent out his wheezing on top of a pressure plate, forcing me to listen to this throughout the battle. Not only did I lose, but the sound still rings in my ear to this day. However, things brightened up when I got 10k with the skill key I earned from chopping wood. I also realized I had enough tokens to change one of my Pokemon's nature. To do that, I can type in /Pokebuilder, which gives me all the info about my Pokemon in regards to their nature, IVs, and EVs. When I click on my Pokemon, I can actually change all of those attributes with the use of tokens. For the price of 100 tokens, I changed Bagon's nature to Jolly, which will increase his speed and lower his special attack. After that, I checked out the kits again to get my daily free steak, free tokens, and I also started claiming the kits I got for my rank. They give a fair number of rare candies and Ultra Balls, which is perfect for my catcher and evolution quests. They also give me a few TMs, and one of them even gives me a random Pokemon. I got the Flamethrower TM, which is great since it's one of the most solid fire moves in the game. After that, I took a little break from battling and instead went on a little treasure hunt. I found out there's presents hiding all over spawn that give free tokens and money. But as I went to go look for them, I fell into this portal that sent me to the end. Just by the looks, this place seemed really cool with all these legendaries in the air. There were also presents here, which was what I was looking for in the first place. I decided to explore here for a bit and realized that this was not the typical end biome. I thought about staying here for a while, but I really just wanted to claim these presents and get out. Afterwards, I teleported back to spawn to see what other presents I could find here. It came to my attention that there was a lot I hadn't explored yet. I also didn't explore the spawn room very well, since there were a couple hidden here. However, those were probably the easier ones to locate since I just could not find any other presents for the life of me. I guess this treasure hunt thing was not completely ideal for a break. But then again, I did miss one that was right under the center fountain, so it's possible that I might just be bad at finding these. However, I did manage to get some tokens to change some natures. For Electrike, I wanted to focus on his speed and special attack, so I gave him a timid nature. And for Tortuga, I focused on his attack and defense, so I gave him an adamant nature. After that, I left spawn to go do my quest, and in the Mesa, I found this huge Aeron. I thought he'd be an easy catch, but he turned out to be super annoying and fled each battle. It was taking me so long that it eventually became nighttime before I could capture him. It set me back a little, but it didn't stop me from completing this quest. I checked my progress, and it looked like I just needed one more Pokemon. It was a pretty special moment, and I thought about fighting this boss, but I also just wanted to get it done. Once I got it done, I claimed my reward and completed a third of my first goal. I ranked up from student to trainer, and I thought I'd take it on as well since it gives double the rewards. Now with the great key I got from the quest, I opened the great crate and got a god fishing rod. This item had crazy enchants, and I was pretty excited to go fishing. But before I head to the ocean, I had some rare candies left to give to my Pokemon. I gave a few to Bagon, and he finally started to evolve. In the process, his body swelled up in the shape of a sphere and transformed into Shelgon. For some reason, he stared at me with such anger in his eyes, and it kinda made me uncomfortable. I guess it runs in the family, because Manectric did the exact same thing. I couldn't take the pressure, so I put them back in their Pokeballs. Now when I evolved Tortuga into Carracosta, I expected him to be a lot bigger, but I honestly love the size he was now. Riding on the shell of this tiny turtle was super funny looking. It's hard to believe that this guy's in charge of defense for my team. The squad is looking pretty solid right now, but I do want to fill up the other slots soon. But as I mentioned before, it is now time to fish. I built a platform in the middle of the deep ocean and hoped to catch something good. I caught some pufferfish, a ton of raw cod, a fishing rod, a name tag, more raw cod, and a couple of enchanted books. I also found this shiny primal Kyogre that spawned right below my platform, but I started drowning before I could even fight it or catch it. But then I said to myself, wait a second, there's no way a primal Kyogre could even spawn. That's 100% an ultimate boss. I still wanted to fight it, but I couldn't see how I would do it without drowning, so I just left it in the ocean. I didn't really catch anything good, but I did get a skill key from fishing and got a decent amount of cash. I got even more cash when I browsed through the Poke menu and found the streak section. By voting every day for 4 IRL days, I was rewarded with rare candies, tokens, and a little bit of money. Now the best part is, the rewards became even better the higher my voting streak, which was pretty awesome to say the least. Hopefully I can make it to day 105. Now with the voting key I got from the streaks, I was able to get a Pokeball package which included a GS ball. This got me super excited because I had just learned about the /warp shrines feature. This warp has all the shrines in the game, which makes it super convenient. If I had the right items, I could summon the 3 legendary birds, and I can even get the Azure Flute for Arceus. More importantly, I can summon Celebi using this shrine with my GS ball. I was so pumped up to catch it, but then I found out I had to pay a $250,000 fee to use it. This whole time I thought I would get a legendary for free, but I guess everything comes with a price. Afterwards, I checked the progress on the catcher quest, and I still had a lot of Pokemon to catch. I needed to catch some ice Pokemon, and I'm glad I set a home here at the Ice Spikes. While I was here, I was able to find an Alolan Sandshrew. It was my first time ever seeing one, and I was pretty glad to catch it. It soon became morning, and as I continued to catch more Pokemon, a message popped up on the screen saying a Keldeo had spawned near me. I found the little guy by the river and threw a Master Ball at him. And with that, I captured my first legendary, and even got some achievements along with a congratulations message. I was so happy to have caught him, but there was just one problem. I already had a water type, and I just could not let my tiny turtle go. In terms of overall stats, Keldeo obviously had an advantage, but it was mostly in speed. For Caracosta, speed didn't really matter since he had Aqua Jet and the Sturdy ability. I also wanted to use Caracosta for other purposes, so I chose him for the final team. Moving on, I headed back to the desert to catch more Pokemon. While I was here, I thought about what other type of Pokemon I would want for my team, and the one I thought of actually spawned in the daytime. I wanted to catch a Larvesta, which was a bug/fire type, but was super rare to find. As I searched for one, I found an uncommon boss, which was much easier for me to take on than these ultimate ones. I still had Keldeo on the team, and I'm glad I did because thanks to him, I was able to defeat my first boss. Now the next few days were pretty rough considering that all I could really do was hope for Larvesta to spawn. However, it wasn't all that bad since I was able to find all these cool looking Pokemon I hadn't seen before. This helped me make some major progress on my quests. Interestingly enough, I stayed in the desert long enough for multiple bosses to start spawning next to each other. Eventually though, I was finally able to find Larvesta after what felt like an endless search. It took forever to catch this bug, but I was glad to welcome him to the team. For Larvesta, I wanted him to be a speedy special attacker, so in the Pokebuilder, I changed his nature to timid. Moving on, I stayed in the forest biome to catch different types of Pokemon. I have to tell you though, some of these Pokemon were super annoying to catch. They were also super tiny, making it hard to throw my balls at them, and some of them just did not want to get caught. For the ones that annoyed me, I made sure to take them down. All of a sudden, as I wandered through the forest, a Zacian spawned near me, and I went into full panic mode because of all the trees in the way. It took a little bit of time, but I did find the blue wolf, and he was a lot bigger than I imagined him to be. As soon as I battled him, he went into his crowned sword form, which was pretty intimidating. I did have 2 Master Balls left, so there was absolutely no need to worry about catching him. I was thrilled to have this guy, and I think he'll be a great asset to the team considering he's one of the strongest legendaries. In his second form, he becomes a Fairy/Steel type, which are arguably the best types. I got on his back and was having a lot of fun hopping around with him. He was also incredibly fast and traveled to other biomes in a matter of seconds. After spending a ton of time with him, I came up with an amazing idea for who I wanted as the last member of my team. I wasn't really sure if he was Zacian's sibling or rival, but I spent a few nights in the forest in hopes to find Zamazenta. I heard that he has a really high spawn chance, so I was always prepared for his name to pop up. Meanwhile, I chased down the Skitty, and I wasn't going to stop until he finally got inside my ball. However, he was completely immune to my Ultra Balls because none of them seemed to work whenever I threw them. That annoying cat actually escaped, and as I tried to find him, Zamazenta appeared right in front of me. The big bad wolf looked absolutely terrifying, especially since it was nighttime. He went into his second form when I battled him, and it was quite amazing seeing these two against each other. But little did they know, I would soon catch him with my last Master Ball, and they'd be a part of the same team. I threw him out and admired just how awesome he looked. I just couldn't believe that I had both the Pokemon Sword and Shield mascots in the squad. After catching Zamazenta, I finally had my full team. I tested him out, and he proved to be super strong after taking down a level 50 Tauros. Although, I did notice that he tends to be extremely fidgety and can't stay in one place. Now when I was about to change their natures, I ran into a little problem. I needed a total of 200 tokens for the both of them, and I only had 178. I tried looking for presents around spawn, but I just couldn't find any. Until I opened the Poke menu and found this section called Present Hunt. It gave me a list of places where I could find presents, one of them being the safari. I warped to the safari to try and see what this was all about. I was in this purplish mushroom biome and found a present right up front. While I was here, I found some crazy looking Pokemon that I hadn't seen before in the wild. I also went to this beach that had a bunch of different water Pokemon and even had some starters. I found a Squirtle, a Poplio, and even an Oshawott. After the beach, I went into this fairy forest. Some of the Pokemon here were quite strong and pretty high leveled. This forest looked extremely nice, and I wanted to stay here, but I also wanted to see the other biomes. I love the aesthetics of this whole safari, and I was pretty enticed to stay here for a bit. Next up was the desert biome, and I was pretty shocked to see a Beldum here. I noticed that there were also a ton of Pokemon here, and most of them were extremely rare to find in the wild. I then headed over to what looked to be some ice wonderland, and I was pretty amazed to see all these different ice Pokemon that I couldn't find back at the ice spikes. There were a lot of them here, and it even felt a bit overwhelming. After that, I found this huge mountain, and I was super excited to find a Charmander and a Chimchar here. I guess it didn't matter too much which starter I picked, considering I could find them here. The next place I just had to check out was this huge mountain at the center of the safari. But after seeing these fire types, I suppose this is actually a volcano. I got inside the volcano and found a present here, which I totally did not forget about. I also climbed to the tippy top to find a Charizard flying near me. Not only did I find starters, but I found their evolved forms as well. There were also a ton of bosses here that were pretty much impossible to fight considering they had 50 more levels than my legendaries. Now the downside of the safari was that the Pokemon were not naturally spawned, but it's still a great place for me to train and complete my Pokédex. It's also a really great place to find presents since this area is a lot smaller than I thought it was. After giving Zamazenta an Adamant Nature, I completely finished giving out natures at the cost of 600 tokens. I eventually left the safari to go back to catching Pokemon, and as I was about to fight this boss, a Salamence spawned above us. It was a legendary boss, and I was so happy to find it because there was a chance of it dropping a Megastone. However, he was way too high level for my Pokemon, and they stood absolutely no chance against it. As I stood here not knowing what to do, another boss spawned as well. He was only an epic boss, so I thought there was hope for me, but he took down all my Pokemon like they were nothing. I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do to beat these guys, and I didn't think I had many options either. I did fight this camera up to help boost my self-esteem, and it actually went pretty well. He was the same level as the Metagross, but was a lot easier to fight since he's so much weaker. When I took him down, I received a lot of items as well as a keystone. I put it on as a necklace and was glad to beat my first epic boss. But right as I say that, another boss spawns right in front of me, and this time it's an ultimate. Was the game trying to make fun of me? Why were there so many bosses here? But more importantly, why were these bosses so overpowered? Maybe I'm just imagining things and they're not actually here. If I see one more overpowered boss, I think I might just lose it. Of course, there's a giant mega evolved ultimate Tyranitar here. At this point, I'm not really surprised. But who knows, maybe I have a chance at this. Or maybe he'll get rid of my legendaries, who are my only chance. Meanwhile, I was able to finish catching all the Pokemon I needed for the quest. It wasn't easy, but I finally did it. I finally completed the catcher quest and can now claim the rewards. I also needed just 3 more evolutions, and I decided to use a couple of my rarest catches. This Beldum was an absolute pain to catch. I think I used up to 15 to 20 Ultra Balls before giving up and using a Master Ball on it. Nonetheless, I was pretty glad to have found these Pokemon, especially this Groudle who evolved into my favorite grass type. I mean, just look at this guy. He literally has a tree on his back. Also, Metagross is cool and all, but I'm still pretty mad that I had to waste a Master Ball. But after evolving him, I had finally accomplished my first goal of completing the 3 main quests. Also, the next quest after that seemed very rewarding, so I made sure to accept that. Meanwhile, after getting crushed by those bosses, I wanted to start training my team seriously, which is why I warped to the EV Center. I can buy a lucky egg here to level up like crazy, and I can buy a bunch of berries that affect my Pokemon stats. More importantly, this place is primarily used for training EVs, and if you're not sure what they are, they basically raise your Pokemon stats. By fighting the Pokemon in this mesa, I can raise their defense, and by fighting the Pokemon on this beach, I can raise their special defense. For me, I want to focus on attack and special attack stats since my Pokemon already have high numbers in those. I can also type in /EVS1 to see the EVs on my Shelgon. I want to max out his attack and speed, and I don't need the rest except for low HP. Now the great thing about the EV Center is that there's a lot of cool Pokemon here that I don't normally see, which is great for the dex. But I don't actually plan on staying here for too long since there's a better EV Center made for donors. By typing in /warpDEV, I can teleport to this huge castle where I plan to train for a bit. This place is super well designed to make EV training a lot easier and more efficient. For each stat, there are different level trainers ranging from easy to medium and to hard. Since my Shelgon is not that highly leveled, I figured it'd be best to start with the medium trainers. I wanted to max out my attack, but I couldn't because of the other stats. To decrease those stats, I can buy berries from the normal EV Center, or I can go into the Poke Builder and change those using tokens. Now these berries are super expensive, and I'll have to buy a lot of them. The only way I was able to afford this was by having multiple sources of income. Those sources include the quests, the crates, the voting streaks, the skill keys, the treasure hunt, selling items, and pretty soon, the Pokédex rewards. After fighting this trainer, my Shelgon finally evolved into Salamence, and I couldn't have been happier. He now has wings and is able to learn one of his best moves. I got on his back and took him out for a little test fly. There's no better feeling than riding a dragon around a castle, especially if that dragon took ages to train. However, I'm not done training him and he still has a long way to go. He's going to be crucial when taking on the battle tower, so I'll need him to be ready. Now, there's a maximum number of EVs I can have and a max number of EVs for each stat, so after maxing out attack and speed, I put the rest of my points into health. By doing so, I finished EV training for Salamence. Afterwards I trained Manectric, and since he was pretty weak, I had to make him fight the baby Pokemon. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that I can further complete the Pokédex here, considering I'm fighting so many different Pokemon. I typed in /dex, and after completing 10% of the Pokédex, I was offered a bunch of rewards, such as money, tokens, and even a Great Key. I guess I killed 2 birds with 1 stone after battling and catching all those Pokemon. Also, a little off topic, but at the time I'm recording this, Pixelmon 8.3 just came out with a bunch of new features. The battle screen now has information on the weather and terrain, and the Pokemon have new attack animations as well. I've heard that they've also released an Externamax for Eternatus, and I hope to check that out sometime in the future. But right now, my main mission is to first max out the EVs for all my Pokemon. Now instead of maxing out speed for Zamazenta, I actually maxed out his HP since I wanted to utilize his full potential of being a shield. I also was really happy when he learned close combat, which I would say is his best move. It lowers his defense and special defense stats, but that doesn't really matter since those are already super high. Speaking of moves, when I got Larvesta to level 59, he evolved into Volcarona and learned Quiver Dance, which is a really good stat booster. Now when he evolved, he was super tiny and I just wanted him to be a lot bigger. After collecting a few presents in the EV Center, I went into the Poke Builder to change his size to ginormous. I had the tokens, so I changed Caracosta's size as well. I honestly love the size that they were now, and to me, I felt like it was a worthy investment. I may have maxed out the EVs of all my Pokemon, but I'm still not done with training. Back at the donor EV, there's this huge building called the Level Grinder, which is an amazing place for me to get all my Pokemon to level 100. The trainers here have level 100 Blissies that'll give my Pokemon a ton of EXP. By doing this, my Pokemon leveled up rapidly, and Salamence quickly learned Outrage, one of his best dragon moves that I can replace Dragon Claw with. Once my Pokemon are all level 100, I'll feel a lot more prepared to take on the battle tower. But even after getting them all to level 100, there was still more I needed to do. I needed to teach my Pokemon all the moves that they need to become the utmost powerful, which is going to take a lot of TMs and TRs. In the TM shop, I looked through the TRs and saw that these moves were super expensive and I also need to buy a lot of them as well. While I tried to figure that out, I found a legendary boss and I was pretty excited to finally beat one. And once I did, I was pretty confident that I could take on any boss I encounter from here on out. Now back to the money situation, I collected a lot of TMs for my kits, so I decided to sell all the ones I didn't need at the Pokemart since they're apparently worth a lot. I also wanted to do the second evolution quest since it gives a lot of money. My kits gave me a ton of rare candy, so I was able to evolve a lot of the Pokemon I had caught before. It was pretty cool to have all these evolved Pokemon, and it even felt like a second team, except this one looked a lot more evil. In the second round of evolutions, I honestly felt like this was a pretty solid team. Ampharos, Slowbro, Chandelure are really good Pokemon, and this team has a lot of variety. Now the next team I'm about to show you might just be the most horrendous team I've ever seen. I'm not sure why though, it's just something about these Pokemon that just doesn't sit right with me. Now the final round of evolutions was probably the coolest. There were some Pokemon I've never seen before, and they were just really well designed. Anyway, after claiming my reward, I finally had enough money to buy all the TMs I wanted. I went on a massive shopping spree, and it felt pretty good spending all this money. After doing that, I found this ultimate boss, and I was confident that I would beat him super easily. But then he ended up destroying 3 of my Pokemon. Luckily my Zacian took him down, helping me beat my first ultimate. Aside from TMs, I can slash warp tutors to learn even more moves here. To buy moves here, I need to buy Zephyr badges, which are 7,500 each. Now that is extremely expensive, which is why I bought 2 since I could only afford 1 move. Now that all my Pokemon know their moves, I'd like to quickly introduce them. Salamence, my companion since day 1, is my attacking lead with the moves Fly, Outrage, Stone Edge, and Earthquake. Manectric, the first Pokemon I caught, is my special sweeper who knows Thunder, Volt Switch, Flamethrower, and Thunderbolt. Caracosta, my first fossil Pokemon, is my tank with the moves Stone Edge, Waterfall, Shell Smash, and Aqua Jet. Volcarona, the Pokemon that was an absolute pain to find, is my glass cannon, knowing the moves Fiery Dance, Bug Buzz, Quiver Dance, and Giga Drain. Zacian, the legendary I found in the forest, is my physical sweeper with the moves Close Combat, Swords Dance, Iron Head, and Play Rough. And last but not least, Zamazenta, the legendary I found while chasing a cat, is my wall with the moves Close Combat, Psychic Fangs, Iron Head, and Crunch. My team is finally at their max potential, and it is now time to take on the Battle Tower. I warped to the battle towers and noticed there were different colored pathways to each tower. The green, yellow, orange, and red paths led to the easy, normal, hard, and insane towers. My goal was to defeat the first battle tower, so I went with the green path. I apparently get more rewards the more NPCs I defeat, but I only have 1 try at this per day. Regardless, I entered the tower and was confident that I'd still beat it. My Salamence was first up to bat against the Sudowoodo. He was a rock type, so I used Earthquake but got him down to 0.4% HP. How does that even happen? After Salamence fainted, I brought out my fighting type against his normal type and he took him down with 1 hit. He eventually brought out an Alolan Raticate, a dark/normal type, and since fighting is good against both of those, Zamazenta had no trouble. I then cleared out his last 2 Pokemon with Manectric's Thunderbolts. Now, this next trainer actually had Pokemon that were 5 levels above mine. I took her Simisear down with an Earthquake, but then I was up against another Dragon type. Dragon beats Dragon, and since he was 5 levels above Salamence, he absolutely destroyed him. However, Zacian took care of him, along with the other 4 Pokemon on her team. Zacian is super strong, and I now understand why everyone loves him. However, I can't forget about Zamazenta because he's strong as well. He might not do as much damage as Zacian, but he can definitely take a hit or 2. He actually ended up defeating this guy's team by himself, which made me really proud of him. Now I finally made it to the last NPC, and I was pretty nervous for the fight. Her Pokemon were level 110, so this wasn't going to be easy. However, my Volcarona was a huge help, and she was able to pump out a lot of damage. Her attacks were strong, but she wasn't the most durable. Thankfully, I still had Zacian, who at this point is pretty much a one-man army. After taking down her last Pokemon, I had finally completed my second goal of defeating the first battle tower. Upon doing so, I was rewarded with 16 rare candy, 25 tokens, $10,000, and a Master Ball. After winning, I gave a little victory speech to my team, congratulating them and honoring their hard work. Our journey may be coming to an end, but it's not over yet since we still need to defeat the Battle Frontier. Before I head out and go do that, I wanted to get a Mega Stone first for my Salamence. As I waited in the Mesa, instead of finding a Salamence, I actually found a Mega Evolved Aggron. I honestly think that Aggron is one of the coolest Pokemon I've ever seen, but him being Mega Evolved makes him 10 times cooler. After beating him, I got his Mega Stone, and I obviously had to test it out on my own Aggron. This makes me a lot happier than you would think. Anyways, I eventually did find a Salamence, and this time it was an ultimate. I was beaten so many times by the last Salamence, so now it was time for my revenge. Although, he did have 50 more levels than my Pokemon, so I need to be careful. Thanks to Volcarona's Flame Body, the majority of my damage actually came from burning him. Once I defeated him, I was so proud that I got my revenge, and got the Megastone as well. Salamence is already a fantastic Pokemon, but with the Megastone, he becomes so much stronger and is pretty much an unstoppable force. However, nothing really changes in terms of looks, except for his wings and I guess his horns. Anyway, I TP'd to the Battle Frontier, and I prepared myself for the final battles. The first member I had to fight was named James, and to me, he looked pretty terrifying. He started out with Primal Groudon, and I started out by Mega Evolving my Salamence. I used an Earthquake on him, but I only got him down to 5%. My speedy Manectric finished him off, but then he got absolutely destroyed by a Darmanitan. He then sent out a Ghost Arceus, so I countered that with my Dark move. He decided to switch out Arceus for Mewtwo, which was actually perfect for me. He evolved his Mewtwo into Mega Mewtwo X, which is still a Psychic type that's weak against Dark moves. Up next was his Necrozma, which he immediately evolved into Ultra Necrozma, one of the most powerful Pokemon out there. But he is a dragon, and dragons are weak to fairy moves. I then used a Stab move to take down Arceus, but then he sent out a Shuckle. However, it only took a couple of play roughs to end him. His last Pokemon was Darmanitan, and I took him down with one shot, which scored me the victory against James and allowed me to talk to Joe. Before talking to Joe, I found this gigantic beast in the ocean. It was a shiny legendary boss, but for some reason I couldn't fight it, so I just left it in the ocean. Now my buddy Joe here tried to tickle me with Cinderace, but I tickled him even harder with Salamence. Once he sent out Xerneas, I switched out Salamence for Zacian and took down his fairy type with Behemoth Blade. He had a Landorus, so I used Waterfall to take away most of his HP and used Aqua Jet to finish him off. Next up was Greninja, but he switched him when I used Crunch, and I ended up taking down his Necrozma. Now this guy had a Mega Evolved Salamence as well, and he was pretty equally matched with Zamazenta. He took down Zamazenta, but I still had Zacian who had no trouble taking down a dragon. All he had left was an Ash Greninja, but all it took was one close combat to be victorious, and now I can speak to Alan. Now for Alan's team, all I had to do was use Swords Dance, which allowed me to one-shot every single one of his Pokemon, earning me the win and allowing me to speak to Gabe. Now my fight against Gabe was interesting, since he also had a Duskmane Necrozma, who my Volcarona was able to beat. Side note, I do apologize for these bad camera angles. I believe it's a Pixelmon bug that's been going on for a decade or so. Anyways, this guy also had an Arceus, who he switched for Deoxys, which I was happy about since my Dark move absolutely crushes his Psychic type. His Arceus did take down Zamazenta, which left Zacian to take care of the rest. If there's one Pokemon I can trust to take a whole team by himself, it's Zacian. He's been carrying the team, and there's no doubt that he's my strongest fighter. After winning the battle, I can now challenge Bradley. Before I do that, I know I've been talking about my best Pokemon a lot, but not my worst. My Manectric has been pretty useless in battle, so I swapped him for Keldeo. Manectric is not a bad Pokemon, it's just that he's kinda useless without his Megastone. His stats are pretty below average, but once you Mega Evolve him, he actually becomes usable. Now my fight against Bradley was super hard, considering he had some top tier Pokemon, but it wasn't impossible. He sent out Dragapult, which is an excellent ghost Pokemon, but it's super weak against dark moves. He also had a Metagross that did an insane amount of damage, but my Zacian took it down with a close combat. I then used Swords Dance to prepare my Zacian for the 1v5, and I was able to take his Cinderace down with a close combat. This guy even had a Steel-type Arceus, but since fighting is good against Steel, he wasn't an issue at all. Now Zacian did the best he could against Tornadus, but he ended up falling, which left me with two Pokemon. I finished Tornadus off with a close combat, and all he had left was a Tyranitar. The nice thing about Tyranitar is that he's a rock/dark type, meaning he's super weak against fighting types, and after winning against Bradley, I can now speak to John. He started the battle with Rayquaza, and since it's dragon versus dragon, I figured I could take him down with an Outrage. Next up was Kyogre, and since it was normal Kyogre instead of primal, I had no problem beating him down. After that was Heatran, who Caracosta was an absolute perfect match for. He also did a lot of damage on Pheromosa before he fainted. I then pulled out Zacian in hopes that he would handle the rest, but he actually ended up fainting, leaving me with 2 Pokemon left again. I decided to pull out my Volcarona, and I wasn't disappointed in the slightest when I did. With his Fiery Dance, he was able to clean up the rest of his Pokemon. His last Pokemon was a Grass type, who stood absolutely no chance against my Fire type. I defeated John and was on my way to take down the final leader. I went back home to swap items and to strategize for the final battle, but when I went outside, I actually found a golden Manectric right here in the plains biome. This was exactly what I needed, because with his Megastone, I can finally Mega Evolve Manectric to unlock his true potential. This made me super confident that I would win the battle. Now the downside to this is that I can only have 1 Mega Evolve Pokemon in battle, but Salamence is already strong without it, so I'm not too worried. Anyway, it is now time to take down the last tier 1 trainer of the Battle Frontier. His Pokemon were level 120, but I was able to do some damage with Volt Switch. I switched Manectric for Caracosta and was able to take down the first member. His next Pokemon was a Mega Evolved Aerodactyl, and since he's a Rock type, I was able to do some pretty good damage with Aqua Jet. But as soon as I pulled out Zamazenta, he switched out Aerodactyl for Ho-Oh. However, 2 can play that game, so I switched out Zamazenta for Keldeo to negate his fire attacks. I used a Kamehameha on him, but then he healed up with Roost and switched out again for Magearna. I was not going to let him get his way, so I pulled out my Steel type against his Fairy type and did some massive damage. One last Behemoth Blade took him out, and he brought out Aerodactyl again. I wanted to make his life miserable, so I brought out my Fighting type against his Rock and pummeled him to the ground. He sent out Palkia and got scared when I used Outrage, but then I ended up taking down his Ho-Oh with it. Outrage actually hit for a 3rd time, taking down his Palkia and winning me the battle. And with that, I had finally completed my 3rd goal of defeating every tier 1 trainer of the Battle Frontier. I can't believe Salamence, my buddy since day 1, was able to clutch out and take 2 legendaries by himself. I really enjoyed fighting the Battle Frontier, and I definitely plan on fighting the whole thing someday. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all the support you leave on this video, and I will see you next time.